Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome all the attendees to the first webinar of the year 2013. The topic of today's webinar is Human Capacity Development in Emerging Tourism Destination. Peter Semone will share his experience in developing human capital in Laos through distinct education and training initiatives under the auspices of the Laos National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality. Please join me to welcome our honored guest speaker, Mr. Peter Semone. Before I leave the floor to Peter, for any question you may have, please send in by typing in the question box, as all attendees will be in a listening mode. All the questions will be answered at the end of the session. So it's about time now. I'm leaving the floor and let Peter start.
Thanks very much, Monica. I have to admit to being a little bit intimidated by this style of presentation. I'm used to sitting up in front of an audience and actually sort of interacting with the audience. So I hope that I do okay in my first webinar. I want to, before I begin with the presentation, I want to just briefly talk about my feelings on human capital development. I think that if you look at tourism in the Asia-Pacific region over the last 20 or 30 years, we've done an incredibly good job of developing infrastructure and, if you will, the hardware to support tourism. And I think as we're on a cusp, and the cusp that I'm talking about is that as we move forward and now that the infrastructure is at such a high quality, one could argue that the infrastructure in Asia Pacific is probably among the best in the world. I think the next challenge for tourism going forward is going to be to focus on the people, because it doesn't really matter how nice your hotel is or how great your infrastructure is. If the people are not able to interact with the tourist in the visitor economy, you'll never succeed as a tourism destination. So this whole theme of human capital development is something that I'm very pleased to see PATA taking on very seriously, because I think it creates a great opportunity for PATA going forward to really take a leadership role in a very, very important element of the development of Asia Pacific going forward. So I just, as a prelude, wanted to mention that. And I'm pleased to say that this is the first of the human capital development series that we're going to do. I know Professor Perry Hobson will be doing something in April, and then also our colleague Professor Chris Bottrill will also be doing something on human capital development. So it's a great theme, and I hope to today, as we talk over the next 45 minutes, or as I talk to you, I hope that we can kick off this whole new theme for PATA. I'm sure I know many of you out there, but just in case there's some people that I don't know out there, I just wanted to briefly tell you about who I am. I'm a Californian by birth. I like to say Californian rather than an American, because California is a distinct place within the United States and within the world. I was fortunate enough to go to 2 Ivy League schools in the U.S. on the East Coast. I went to the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, founded by Benjamin Franklin. And I also went to Cornell University, where I studied tourism development. I'm actually an Indonesian at heart. I spent 12 years working and living in Indonesia, and my wife is Balinese, so Indonesia is very, very close to me. PATA is in my DNA. My father worked for PATA for many years. My entire life, PATA has been part of my my memories, and I'm very happy to now be part of PATA, playing a role as a volunteer to help continue to move the association forward. I also spent a couple of years working with the ADB, or for an ADB project in Vietnam, focusing on tourism development, and that was my real first entree into international development cooperation. And as a result of working with the ADB, I later got a job working with Luxembourg government, Luxembourg Development Cooperation, and that's where I'm working now, specifically in Laos, helping the Luxembourg government and the Lao government to implement a project to enhance human resources in the Lao PDR. So just a quick brief as to who I am. Now we'll move into it. The presentation, I've divided it into 5 parts. I hope it's interesting. I hope it keeps people invigorated. Really what I'm looking at is an emerging destination such as Laos, which is real tourism is quite new to Laos. So some of the challenges that we're facing there are challenges that other developing destinations, emerging destinations are facing. And some of the issues and challenges they have there are also things that developed destinations are facing. So first I want to talk a little bit about Laos and tourism in Laos and what I call TVETs, which is Technical Vocational Education and Training. I'll then move into explaining to you what Luxembourg does in terms of helping Laos to develop their tourism. Then I want to talk to you about our institute that we've developed, which is the Laos National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality, also known as Lanith. And I want to talk to you about our sustainability measures. I want to share with you some of the lessons learned, and then also invite you to maybe help us at Lanith to continue to develop our institute. So that's an outline of what we'd like to talk about this afternoon. First of all, in terms of Laos, it's called the Lao People's Democratic Republic. Laos became independent in the 70s, following a up and down history that included the French being there for many years, and a very rich history actually Laos has going back many hundreds of years. There's 6.5 million people living in Laos. 60% of them, interestingly, live on less than $1 or $2 a day. So it's still a relatively poor country, and a lot of people are living agrarian lifestyles. It's one of 5 communist countries left in the world, and that's unique in many ways, and I think also adds to the flavor of Laos as a tourist destination, and certainly in the way that Laos looks at its place in the world. Major industries in Laos: mining. There's a huge amount of gold in Laos. Hydropower, because of the Mekong River, there's a huge hydropower industry which powers most of Laos, and actually there's a huge export to countries like Thailand. Tourism as an emerging industry for Laos, and of course agriculture. Unfortunately, Laos is still ranked 138th out of 187 in terms of human development. And that's probably one of the reasons that we, Luxembourg, are involved in Laos, is to really help develop people and allow them to have a more prosperous and independent life. So that's a quick glimpse. And of course, geographically, I think everybody knows that Laos is in the Mekong region, what we call the Greater Mekong Sub-region, nestled between Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia and Myanmar and up north China. So it's a landlocked country which creates some challenges of its own because it has to balance its relationships with all of its neighbors in a very delicate way. And I think it influences very much how Laos sees itself on the regional and global stage. In terms of tourism, Laos is moving ahead slowly but surely. I think it has some wonderful qualities. It has lovely, friendly people, very rich history, as I mentioned before, going back many hundreds of years, and it's really got a fabulous, unique ecosystem. The nature in Laos, some of the places that I go to in Laos, I'm stunned by the natural beauty of the forests and the mountains. And of course, as I said, the Mekong River runs through much of Laos along the border, especially with Thailand. While you have all these wonderful assets for Laos, unfortunately, and this is probably the case for many industries, it's a very highly fragmented industry, and you find very low levels of cooperation between the public sector and the private sector, especially in areas like marketing and human resource development. And my view, and I know this is shared by many people, is that if a destination is going to grow properly, it really needs to have very strong public-private partnership. And I think that's one of the really missing elements in a place like Laos. Is they're still struggling very much to find a way to harmonize all of those different stakeholders. The service quality in Laos is unfortunately very low, and the standards are still not at a ASEAN level where they should be. And I think the other thing that I notice about Laos, having lived there now for 4.5 years, is that there's a very limited awareness of tourism, either as a business opportunity for entrepreneurs or even as a career opportunity. So there's a lot of work to bring Laos tourism to its full potential, you know, given the wonderful assets that it has. But there are some fundamental systemic issues that need to be built as we move forward. I think one of the things that captures my mind very much is the reality of tourism in Laos, and this very much fits in with the new PATA modus operandi of talking about the complete visitor economy. Many of my Laotian colleagues from the government, they're always very pleased about the fact that they've increased arrivals by 10% or 15% year on year. But the reality is that Laos is still underperforming countries, for example, like Cambodia. More or less, Cambodia and Laos in 2011 received about 3 million, plus minus 3 million visitors. But what you find if you dig into the numbers is that while Cambodia earned perhaps $2 billion from those 3 million visitors, Laos only was able to generate 400 million. And I think this is the whole idea of the complete visitor economy. As we go forward, we have to be very careful how we analyze our tourism destinations or the performance of our tourism industries. Because if we simply are focused on the number of visitors coming in, are we really representing what the value of the industry? And are we really being honest to ourselves in terms of analyzing how we can improve? So I think that's a very important number. And my point here is that I think in the case of Laos, if they were able to improve their service quality, they would be able to pull a much higher spend visitor to visit their country and thereby produce a lot more revenue, such as a destination like Cambodia. So I think that's one of the systemic or fundamental challenges for a country like Laos. And this is a great picture. The gentleman on the left, this is actually a real picture. This was taken in the south of Laos. I checked into a hotel. Well, I arrived at the hotel from the airport, and that was the bellboy, fast asleep on the sofa. And I dragged my bag in by myself, and I checked into my room, and I came back out. 15 minutes later, he was still fast asleep there. And it's, you know, I hate to take a picture of that poor guy, and I hope he doesn't realize that it's being blasted all over the web. But I think when I think of what needs to happen in Laos and many other countries that are emerging with tourism, we've got to go from this lackadaisical attitude by employees and by everybody towards tourism and move more towards the right side, which is, again, this is an example of another Laotian, but obviously he's been trained, he's feels empowered, and he's quite determined to provide good customer service. So I think the visual really gives you an idea. It doesn't matter, again, it doesn't matter how beautiful your infrastructure is. If you don't have the right people with the right attitude, you will never be able to grow your industry or your individual business. People really make a big difference in tourism. And again, that's why the theme of human capital development is very important. I also just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of what we call in my business in international development cooperation, we call it TVET, which is, again, technical, vocational, education, and training. And in Laos, through a lot of donor assistance from everywhere from the Germans to New Zealand aid to the Japanese to, of course, Luxembourg, Asian Development, ADB, Asian Development Bank. What we've done is we've built a lot of infrastructure. In fact, we've helped to build in all of the technical vocational schools throughout the country, the 17 schools. We've helped to build tourism infrastructure. Or should I say hospitality and tourism school types of infrastructure. As you can see, this picture, this is actually in Luang Namta, which is up in the north of Laos, and you see that a nice kitchen's been built there. Unfortunately, what's happened is that too many times, and this will be a theme that I'll come back to later on in my presentation, too many times we're focused on the hardware, on the infrastructure, but we fail to really consider what I call the software. And if you look at a place like Laos and the education system in terms of hospitality and tourism, it's been said that it's stuck in a cycle of mediocrity. And what we mean by that, and this was done by a well-known professor, Professor Tom Baum out of the University of Strathclyde, basically we have poor quality teachers. We have teachers that have no experience in the hospitality and tourism sector. They're teaching young people to go in the industry, but they themselves really don't have the capacity. There's no uniform curricula, so no school, no two schools are teaching the same thing, and where they are, they're teaching it in very different ways. There's a lack of resources at every level, everything from books to teaching equipment to, again, teachers, trainers. And I think the other thing that is a big issue in some of these schools is that there's very weak management. And all of these things get us caught up in this cycle of mediocrity in which we're graduating students from school that industry is actually not very interested in. They don't have the quality, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the attitude that industry needs. And I think when I think of schools in hospitality and tourism, I always think of a factory, and I think of the end user as being the industry. So if the industry wants a certain type of person, like for example in a factory you would produce a certain type of widget, then you have to modify the design of the widget or the design of the person to actually produce the right type of person. Because when we look at the key performance indicators of a school, it's basically how many people do you graduate, are those people employable, and are you fulfilling the demands of the industry? So again, I'll come back to some of these themes, but I think that gives you a bit of a snapshot in terms of where we are with Laos, where tourism is in Laos, and a little bit of a basic idea of where we are with education in Laos. I now want to move a little bit more specifically to my business that I'm in now. I've always considered myself to be a tourism expert, but I've actually become more of an international developer or part of the international development community. And I want to talk to you about what Luxembourg is doing in Laos. Basically, the entire Luxembourg has a bilateral agreement with Laos. Luxembourg has 10 bilateral agreements with 10 different countries. And in the context of Laos and Luxembourg cooperation, Luxembourg focuses through its implementing agency, which is called the Luxembourg Agency for Development Cooperation, or for short, LuxDev. We implement projects in the health sector. We build clinics, we build hospitals, we do immunization programs, a number of things. We also are working in rural development. So we work in villages to build schools and to build irrigation systems and improve productivity of agriculture. And we also work, of course, in the education and training sector, which is where my project falls under. So LuxDev, the organization for which I work, is responsible for implementing on behalf of the Luxembourg government this project. And our counterpart in Laos is the Ministry of Education and Sports. So my job is to work very closely between the two governments, between LuxDev, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Luxembourg and the Ministry of Education and Sports in Laos. My project specifically is called Project Lao 020, and basically 020 means that it's the 20th project implemented by Luxembourg in Laos. Project Lao 020 is valued at 9.325 million euros, and it's a official development assistance grant, which means that the Lao government does not have to repay this money. And aid comes in a number of forms. It comes as a grant, and sometimes it comes as a soft loan. In this case, again, it's a grant. So the objective, if you look at the top box, the objective of, we call it the development objective of our project is tourism human resource strengthening. And as I've discussed to you earlier, we're really looking at how do we develop and improve the capacity of people to perform better in tourism and to make a better livelihood from it. And I like to divide the things that we focus on into software and hardware. So the blue boxes down below, the software that we've developed through our project is things like we've done a human resource development strategy for the tourism sector for Lao PDR. We've done teacher and trainer capacity development, and I'll get in more detail about that later. And we've also developed a number of distinct education and training programs. We also are implementing hardware in the form of building training centers. We're building the National Institute in Vientiane, and also we're helping to upgrade certain facilities with new equipment. And I have to say, if I were to talk about the difference between software and hardware, I think the software is the really difficult thing to create, and I'll come back to that theme later. And I think it's the more sustainable of the two. Hardware is very easy. You know, hardware is about, it's bricks and mortar, and it's about getting contractors to build buildings and architects to design buildings. But actually getting to use the building for the purpose for which it's been built is sometimes very difficult. And the real important thing when we talk about any sort of human capital development, in my view, is the software. If you've got the software right, then you can make a big impact on changing behavior of people. It's not about the hardware. And I also like to make the comparison sometimes about like the computer industry, the software. Obviously, people like Bill Gates, they figured out long ago that the software is where the value is. And, you know, Michael Dell and other producers of hardware, they've succeeded. But where they have only focused on hardware and not really developed the software, they haven't been able to keep a sustainable competitive edge over a long period of time. And I think educating and training people, again, is really all about the software. But again, I'll come back to that theme a bit later. So I want to maybe get into a little bit more detail about our software, the things that we've done on the software side, and then also review specifically what we've done in terms of hardware. So again, what I said is that we've developed a human resource development strategy for the tourism sector in Laos, and we've also developed what we call, it sounds very complex, it's called the consultative framework. And basically what that means is to bring together stakeholders, because you'll remember early in the presentation I mentioned that it's very key to bring people together, and sometimes in a fragmented industry you need to find ways to draw people together. So our national strategy, we developed it through a lot of research. I think it's very important when building a strategy to talk to industry. Again, it's important that industry is getting the people that they need. Industry sometimes are the ones that take the risk, you know, when they build infrastructure, and there needs to be some public support to create education and training programs that produce the types of people they want. And this was over and over again what we heard from industry when we did our research, is that we want problem solvers. We want good communicators. We want people that are well-groomed. We want people that have a positive attitude. And that theme really resonates as we start to look at how we developed our various programs. We did workshops nationwide where we took our human resource strategy and we actually shared it with government and private sector and education providers and even other development partners. I think one of the things that I'm very pleased about with our consultative framework is we've created this quarterly symposia, and it happens once every quarter, and we bring in a regional expert from Thailand or from Hong Kong or from somewhere in the region, and they come in and they make a presentation, keynote presentation, for an hour or 2 hours. Then we have a little bit of a debate, and it's usually about a pressing issue, something that's important. And what I find is that because of the community that we have with tourism, we all face in one way or another the same challenges in every destination. But sometimes it's a bit of an eye-opener when you bring somebody from outside and have them show best practice or good practice, I should say, or maybe share a challenge that they've had. For example, we had our friends from the Myanmar Tourism Board or Tourism Association, and they came and shared some of the challenges that they have now in Myanmar as they move forward. The other thing that we did is that we've created a website, lanith.com. I encourage you to go there. You can download the HR strategy and find out some other things. We've also focused very much on regional networking, and I think that you cannot operate in a silo. For example, in Laos, for us to just simply operate within the context of Laos and not refer and look across the borders to our neighbors, it would be very hard to develop tourism. And I think this is where associations like PATA still play a critical role, is because they do create a network. Our Education and Training Committee within PATA has a great number of educators and trainers, and that creates, by collaborating, we're able to create a lot of partnership and learn from one another. There's also an organization called the ICE, which is an accreditation group that's based in Australia. Again, a number of outstanding organizations there. And we also focus on public relations. So in terms of our HRD strategy, our consultative framework, these are the sorts of things we do. And I think that any destination needs to have this level of cooperation and collaboration and regionalization or even internationalization. The next bit of the software, which is, I think I mentioned to you, teachers are a challenge. We actually, through our project, invested $1 million US, about 800,000 euros, to develop a core team. We ended up sending 18 young Lao that had bachelor's degrees from the National University of Laos, and we sent them overseas. We sent some of them to Singapore, we sent some of them to Luxembourg, and we sent one young lady to France. We bonded them, meaning that we sent them for 2 years, and they have an obligation to serve the government of Laos and in particular Lanith for 5 years. Fantastic experience, and I think when you're developing teachers and trainers, I think it's very important to get them out of the environment in which they're accustomed to, get them out, get them into an international environment. And I found with all of the core team members that when they came back, they were motivated, they were open-minded, they were thinkers, they were confident. And by virtue of doing this, what we do is we create multipliers. These core team members of teachers and trainers, they're now in a position where they can go forward and they can create teachers and trainers. And we hope to do this again. We hope to have another core team where we'll send some to Ireland perhaps, and maybe even to Malaysia. And I think any emerging destination, you've got to focus on the teachers and the trainers, and ideally for their specific training, be it 1 year or 2 years, they need to get out of their homeland and go somewhere else. The other software that we've developed is called Passport to Success, which is a training program. And I think it's very important. I'll start this theme and it will come up again later. There's a big difference between training and education. And what I've found is that too often people confuse the two, and I think that they need to be thought of very differently. In our case, we think of training as very short-term training for the existing workforce. So we call it Passport to Success. It's based on ASEAN tourism standards, which are commonly agreed by the 10 ASEAN countries. We put together 3 to 4 day modules. We found that that's what industry prefers. They don't like to send their staff off for two weeks or a month or 3 months. They like 3-4 days. We've also developed, within the context of Passport to Success, awards and recognition system. I think that the psychology, when you think about people and about training, if they feel like there's something to be gained from it, something tangible, that it's something that they can be recognized for, you get a lot of more people getting motivated about being trained. And so far, we're very proud, and I'll explain the program to you in a bit more detail, but we've issued 1,000 passports so far, and we've given 1,500 stamps, meaning that every time somebody successfully completes a module, they get a stamp in their passport. And after a sufficient number of stamps, 9 to begin with, you get a bronze pin. At 12, you get a silver pin. And at 15 stamps in a specific area, you'll get a gold pin. And for each module, what we've done is we've created in Lao language training manuals and videos. And in fact, if you go to YouTube and you type in Lanith, you will find a number of our training videos there. We're also very proud to have won the Grand Award in 2012 in the education and training category for Passport to Success. So we're very proud of that program. And if we go to the next slide, I want to show to you a little bit the detail of how the passport system works. As you saw on the previous slide, the cover looks like it just has a cover there. But inside the front cover page, you've got we put the photo of the student, and then we put their name and their date of birth. They actually get a passport number. And then the other pages, you'll see these statements of attainment. So every time somebody successfully completes a module, the date will be written in, and the unit code for one of the modules, the title of the training unit, and then there'll be a signature and a stamp. And it's quite literally a booklet, small passport-sized booklet that people can carry around. And I think it's very interesting. Some general managers have commented to me that people have come to them to interview, and rather than bringing a stack of papers and certificates, they bring their passport and they say, I have done this with Lanith. So I think this whole idea of Passport to Success, it's worked in its pilot phase in Laos, and I actually have a little bit of a dream that maybe we could expand the concept maybe in the greater Mekong sub-region, or maybe even in ASEAN, and maybe even through PATA and the International Labor Organization. Maybe there's a way to take this idea and take it to the next level, not only in one country, but in multiple countries. Let's now shift away from industry training or workforce development, and let's move towards education. And again, I see them as being very different. My definition of education: a young person, a foundation for 2, 3, 4 years, leading to a career in a particular industry. So in this case, in Laos, what we've developed is the Lanith Diploma, 2-year diploma program. It's regionally benchmarked. We've gone from Thailand to Singapore to Indonesia to Malaysia to talk to other schools about what types of programs they have. It's industry driven. Again, we've done what we call a desired graduate profile. We've gone out to industry and said, what kind of student would you like us to produce? Who will be employable? And they've come back and they've told us. We've created a curricula that is owned by our Lao teachers. We created the framework, but our Lao teachers have developed all of the materials, the PowerPoints, the group assignments, and it's mapped for the future. We want the Lanith diploma to be accredited with other organizations, with other schools, so that perhaps in the future, a graduate from the 2-year Lanith program could continue his or her study in another school, maybe in Thailand or in Malaysia, and for another 2 or 3 years, they could get a bachelor's degree, and they could transfer some of those credits. And really the objective of our Lanith diploma is to produce thinking persons with hands-on ability. And if you look at the chart on the right, we've looked at 4 streams. So we're looking at food and beverage production, 4 semesters. We've got food and beverage service operations, again, 4 semesters, accommodation operations, and travel and tourism operations. Everybody is in the same program in the first semester, and then people start to specialize in the second, third, and fourth semester. So that's our education program, and we feel quite comfortable that it will deliver what industry is looking for. Now let me shift over that's the software, which again I think is the most important part. And let me talk a little bit about the hardware, because I have to tell you, to spend 9.3 million euros is not as easy a job as it sounds. And without any hardware, without any buildings, you're really not going to spend that money. We're building in Vientiane. We're going to build what we call the Lanith campus, which will be a center of excellence. We're modifying the design now, but this is indicative of the type of construction that we're looking at. It'll be about a $2 million project in terms of infrastructure development. It'll have classrooms and administrative offices. It'll have a training restaurant and bar. It'll have a rooms division lab, training kitchen, IT lab, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the things that's very innovative, and I'll come back to it again later, is we're trying to develop a public-private partnership hotel, because we can build the infrastructure, but if we cannot find a way to continue to provide financing to operate the infrastructure, it will go to waste. And so we need to find, and we know that the Lao government in this case has limited resources. So we need to, and Luxembourg also is not in a position to pay to operate the school for tens and tens of years. They would probably support it in the short term. So we need to find ways to generate revenue, and that revenue needs to go to be able to operate the institute. So that's our biggest hardware project. We've also got a smaller hardware project or infrastructure project in Luang, Prabang, which actually we opened last week on the 28th of February. We had our open house. It's called the Lanith Luang Prabang. It's a nice looking building. It's built on Ministry of Education land, and it's got a restaurant for 60 people. It's got 4 guest rooms. It's got a training kitchen, and I'd like to make mention of my dear friend Professor Kay Chon and the University, the Hong Kong Poly U, who generously donated their kitchen equipment, which we shipped over from Hong Kong, and it's all put very nicely in our training center there. So we have an excellent training kitchen. We have a meeting room, and it's located, as I mentioned, on the TVET, the TVET school campus in Luang Prabang. Again, we need to focus for Lanith Luang Prabang even, we need to focus on generating revenue so that we can support training initiatives. And so therefore we have a meeting room which can accommodate between 20 and 30 people, small meetings. Of course, we have the restaurant so we can do coffee breaks and lunch and the rest of it. And we have 4 guest rooms, and you can see on the right, they're pretty generously accommodated. They're nice rooms. For about $20 to $25, you can stay very comfortably in Luang Prabang. We have bicycles, and it takes you about 10 minutes to ride your bicycle from Lanith Luang Prabang to the real happening part of Luang Prabang. So any of you that happen to be in Luang Prabang, please welcome to stay with us, and we'd love to have you. We're always excited to receive guests. And I just wanted to finish up my little comment about hardware and software by I want to use the example of an onion, and I want to show that actually the most difficult thing to get to is, and to create in the business that I'm in of behavioral change, is to transfer the knowledge and the know-how. Unfortunately, that's at the middle of the onion, and nobody actually sees that. What people see is they see the outer skin. So, you know, you have your knowledge and your know-how. You have the methodology of how you implement something. You have the human resources and the people that are required to do that. You have the programs. For example, we have Passport to Success, and we have our diploma program. You have the equipment. You have the school and the training centers. So I go back. Yeah, and so it's okay. And you know, the thing with when you use the onion example, what you find is that the counterparts and people that are looking at your project, very often they're only looking at your hardware, your infrastructure, and your equipment. They're not looking at the software. They're not looking at the things that are really the more important things. So I think, you know, what's difficult about international development cooperation is about trying to get people to appreciate that the value is actually at the center of the onion. It's not on the outer layer. The value isn't the building. The value is the know-how of how to use the building to produce the right types of people. So it's a complex paradigm that is very challenging in development cooperation. Let me now. I know we have probably about 5 or 10 more minutes. So let me go through the last 3 sections, which are a bit shorter. I first wanted to talk to you about sustainability, because I think it's a very important issue, especially when you're dealing with international development aid. I like to think of Lanith as a 30 million euro social enterprise. And, you know, at first glimpse, you might say, what is he talking about? But in my view, a social enterprise is a working business whose shareholders are the community, and the whole purpose of the organization and the purpose for making profit is to help people. It's to help develop society. It's not for a single shareholder or to make any individual rich. And I think what's very unique about the Lanith model that we're developing, and I do hope it works in the end, because I think it could be replicated in many parts of Asia, is that we're looking at development cooperation of 10 million euros from Luxembourg, as I explained to you. We have 10 million euros of land value from the Lao government. And I have to mention, you look at the Lao government or the Cambodian government or the Burmese government, all of those governments are land rich and cash poor. And if you look at that in a mutually beneficial, opportunistic way, what you realize is that if you can talk to these governments and say, can we use your land for 30, 40, 50 years? You don't lose the title of the land, but you just transfer land use rights for a period of time. We can then create value for the community. And at the same time, the government, the respective government, doesn't lose possession of that asset. So again, here we have Luxembourg government, public money, 10 million euros. We've got the Lao government, which is coming in with capital or land asset worth 10 million euros. And we're going to be looking in our project in Vientiane, we're going to be looking for a private hotel developer or investor to put in 10, let's just say 10 million euros. So by bringing together the public sector with 20 million euros and the private sector with 10 million euros, we've created an enterprise. And this enterprise benefits the community. So again, it's this idea of social enterprise. It's not as easy said as done. And this is a complicated chart, and I just want to show you, I don't have time to go through the details, but in order for us to create confidence in the Lao government, and create confidence with a private investor, we have to create a very complex financing structure, and which has Lanith, which is being supported through the private sector hotel. But you see there's many stakeholders involved in this particular thing. You have the Luxembourg government and the Laos government. You have a financing holding company for the land asset, which then has to actually make the deal with the hotel developer. You have banks which are going to lend money to the hotel developer, and ultimately the cash flow from the land lease goes through the asset management company and then into Lanith. And we think that we can underwrite maybe half, 60% of the cost of running Lanith every year. So we think it's an innovative way to finance a project, and again, a social enterprise. We also think that for the right hotel company, it's a great CSR move to be able to be involved in a project like Lanith, either in Laos or in Myanmar or wherever else we might expand it, would be a great opportunity for a hotel company to really engage with the community and really show corporate social responsibility. Of course, I think that with anything that has to do with sustainability, you have to also drive governance and management. And too often we find, and I think in particular in Asia, but it probably holds true in Antipodean and North America and Europe, but you find that you sometimes have very weak management and very weak governance structures. And a school requires very strong management and governance structures. So we're looking to have a board of trustees to set all the policies for Lanith. We'll have a chief executive officer who will be hired and will report to the board of trustees. And then, of course, we'll have a chief operating officer and a chief financial officer. But we really believe that the school needs to be run like a business, and it needs to be professional, and it needs to be driven by good vision and direction from a board of trustees. So I think my only point there is sustainability is for sure linked to governance and management. I want to finish up because we're getting to the point where I'm sure maybe some people have some questions, but I wanted to share with you some of the lessons learned from our project, and maybe some of these would be relevant to other people that might be listening. First of all, I think that competitiveness in tourism is all about the people, and I don't think that going forward you can compete on infrastructure alone. You've got to have good people. And in order to have good people, you need to have a good framework, and you need to have very strong education and very strong workforce development programs. I think it's also very important that there's stakeholder coordination and collaboration. The days of people operating in a silo are over. We need to cooperate. We need to work together. And I think this is, again, where an organization like PATA plays an important role. PATA still can be the glue that brings together many different stakeholders. Your teachers and your trainers are number one. I don't care about your infrastructure. You can teach under a coconut tree. It doesn't matter. But you got to have good teachers, and you got to have good trainers, and they have to have practical experience. And they have to be empathetic to the students, and they have to motivate the students. The days of the teacher standing up at the chalkboard and yelling demands and commands to the students, it's over. That's 1950s style. That doesn't work in 2013. You need to engage the student. You need to get the student to think. And the only way you can do that is by having strong teachers and trainers. I'll say it again. Hardware is only as good as the software. If you don't have the software and you only have the hardware, you're not going to get anywhere. I think the other thing, and my colleague Professor Perry Hobson will talk about this in the next webinar, there needs to be industry education partnership. They have to talk together. You know, and industry thinks that educators are stuck up on some ivory tower, and the educators think that industry isn't, you know, quite as intellectual as they are. You got to come together. You got to come across the table, and I think it's extremely important The destinations that are successful are the ones where industry is talking to educators. I think the other lesson learned is that financing for the medium to long term is really important. You can build a school, you can create an educational institution through public money, as in the case of my project, but you've got to be able to think, how are you going to generate revenue going forward to be able to support the institution? And governance and management is at the core. I think the only other point, which is a lesson learned, and I think it's a really important one, is attracting the best and the brightest. Too often nowadays people say, I don't want to work in tourism. I want to work in a bank, or I want to be a government official. Actually, tourism is a hugely wonderful, dynamic industry, but we've got to convince people of that. And I want to show you, I know the quality might not be all that great. It's a 2-minute video. If it doesn't work out, then you can actually go to YouTube and type in Lanith. But I want to show you what we've put together as a little advertisement of how we want to attract the best and the brightest. Let's hope that this works. It's not. I'm getting messages from my colleague Viro, our technical guy, that it's not working out because I linked it through YouTube. So anyhow, to see that video, just go to YouTube, type in Lanith, and then you will get that advert, and you can have a look. It's a 2-minute advert, and it's really meant to just inspire people to work in the tourism sector. So those are some of the lessons learned. I think, you know, when we talk about marketing, we always think about marketing to people that are going to come to our destination. But I think we really need to market to our own communities as well. We need to do what I call internal marketing. We need to inspire young people to work in our industry. We need to inspire people to open businesses and to attract the best and the brightest. So those are some of the lessons learned. I want to finish off with one final thing. I know that there's friends out there that are probably thinking, how can we help out? Is there anything we can do to help Lanith, or is there a way that Lanith can help us? We definitely would be delighted to get any sort of scholarships. If any institutions are able to take somebody for 2 years for a diploma level scholarship for our teachers or our trainers, that would be fantastic. Also internships, we're always interested in recruiting new potential teachers and trainers and sending them off on internships. We want to get people out of Laos and into a new context. Always can use education and training materials. Our friends from UNWTO and the American Hotel and Lodging Association and IFT in Macau have been very generous in providing all sorts of great books and educational materials. The Asia Foundation, I have to mention, also has been very helpful. So books, training materials, equipment. Again, Professor K. Chom, thank you so much. Hong Kong PolyU, thank you so much for that equipment which we've used. Co-financing of infrastructure, that's more about development partners. If there's people that develop Germany or whatever that we can build infrastructure together with, that's helpful. We could also use expert volunteers. There's a lot of people out there that have worked in the industry and maybe they're retired or maybe they have a bit of spare time. We can always use people to volunteer, to come and to teach people or to show people best practice or good practice. And I think the other thing is just simply tell other people about Lanith, and tell your friends. And certainly if anybody comes to Luang Prabang, please stay in our guest house in the Lanith Luang Prabang. And when we have our big hotel in Vientiane and our restaurant, certainly come and use our facilities, because all the money you spend there is spent on improving the community and improving the human capacity of our friends in Laos. So I want to thank you very much. This last picture is fun. Of all the things that have happened, I was very surprised to find we found remnants of the 16th century wall in Vientiane at our site in Vientiane, and we actually had to do an archaeological dig. So you know, my career has always been very interesting. I never know what's around the next corner, but I actually know how to manage and operate an archaeological dig now. I'm not sure when I'll use that skill again, but it's good fun. Anybody has any comments or has any suggestions or wants to just get in touch, that's my email address at the bottom. And once again, thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been interesting, and I hope that there's some value in what I've shared with you this afternoon. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Peter. Now let me repeat again that if any one of you have any questions, you can just send in by typing in. While we're waiting, Peter, is there anything else that you would like to add on to today's session?
My gosh, I think I've spoken so much. I probably, my monotone voice has probably bored everybody. So no, not at the moment. I just love to see if there's any questions, and nothing else to add from my side. We're just getting this up and see if
we receive any questions.
Yeah, and if we don't, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the viewers just commented that the screen is moving slowly.
Yeah, but congratulations to Pat also. I think this form of disseminating information is coming together. It's still early days. This is what, the third or the fourth webinar, yeah? Just overall, I think from last year we had Mr. Van Wolbeek, I think last year.
Last year we had like 3 series of it.
Yeah. So it's getting there, and yeah, I think somebody made a comment that things are a bit slow, but we're getting there, and again, I think it's great stuff.
So I believe that we haven't received any questions.
That's very good. That means that I either everybody fell asleep, or maybe I answered everybody's questions in the process of my presentation. If there are no questions, Monica asked me to just remind everybody about the PATA Annual Summit, PASS as we call it, which will take place from April 25 to 28 here in Bangkok at the Centara Grand and Bangkok Convention Center. It's the theme of it is about embracing the complete visitor economy, which is really PATA's new modus operandi as it goes forward, is to really see, you know, tourism needs to take sort of more of a center position within the global economy. And, you know, the automobile industry and the computer industry, they seem to have very loud voices, but tourism needs a bigger voice. And by looking at ourselves in maybe a slightly different way as a complete visitor economy, we might be able to get people's attention. So it's going to be a great event. There's a number of speakers that have already confirmed and many more coming. So I would only encourage everybody, if you haven't registered, to register, because it'll certainly be a good networking event and a good way to be active with PATA. And this is the information as to how you can register. You can email events@pata.org, or you can visit the website at www.pata.org/2013pass. So once again, thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing you end of April in Bangkok.
Thank you so much, Peter, for your contribution today. One second, sorry. Is there any another question? Oh, we actually do believe a lot of.
Oh, we do have. Wow, we have questions
okay,
now.
perfect.
All right. Let me see.
Okay.
My dear friend William Wong from IFT. How are you, William? Share my experience in finding the balance in Laos. Well, first of all, Laos is a Buddhist country, so it's only by nature that everything is balanced. The yin and the yang are delightfully balanced. But I think when we talk about balance in the context of what I'm doing, it's about trying to balance the needs of the industry with the capacity of the young people that we're teaching and training, and also with the capacity with our teachers and trainers. So it's really probably a triple or quadruple balance of what are the needs of industry, what's the capacity of the students, what's the capacity of the educators or the trainers, and what's the capacity or the quality of the training materials that exist. So I think that's sort of what we're looking at in terms of balance there. Let's see what else I would like to ask. Yeah, there's a good question here about public-private sector partnerships and enhancing teaching, and I think this is a great question. My view is that that neither the public sector nor the private sector can operate independent of one another. And when we look at education and at training and at destination development, we really need to map out in a consultative way. We need to map out and agree on what the roles and responsibilities of each party are. I don't think that they're always going to be the same for every destination. They'll be different. So in the case of Laos, for example, I think the strong role of the government is required, especially because of the form of government that Laos has. But at the same time, the private sector needs to be more empowered to be able to be able to engage. And I think the other thing is that when you're looking at education, when you're developing education programs, again, you need to always have the private sector involved in that discussion. Too many times I've seen happen in some countries where the government dictates what the curricula is going to be and does not involve industry whatsoever. And the outcome of that will always be that you will deliver students that are not work ready and that are not the types of students that industry is looking for. So in the absence of partnership, you're going to be in big trouble and you're not going to accomplish what you'd like to. Let me just see if there's anything else. Yeah, let me see. And then there's a couple of thank yous. I think that's about it. I definitely, William, I see you've written quite a few things. Would love to maybe exchange emails with you, William, or maybe you should come to Vientiane, come say hello, or I'll come over to Macau. So I think that's it, Monica. I think we're all set. Once again, thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much, Peter. Now, at the end, I would like to thank all the attendees, all the delegates who attended today, and I hope that you all enjoyed today's session. We look forward to welcome you all again on the next webinar on April 10 with Professor Perry Hobson. And lastly, just a quick reminder that the registration for PARA Annual Summit is now open. Please register and don't forget to attend. And if you have any further query on this, you can just email us at events@para.org. Thank you.